gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do?
Hello everyone, it's Petty Officer Romero with Job Corps. Today our subject, report writing. Now, we have in the past discussed the difference between report writing and taking notes, or field notes, whichever you prefer to call them. Field notes are when we go out and investigate a situation, and what we're trying to do is collect as much information as possible. Then from that information, the end result will be a report that we write and publish. Now, publishing might be anywhere from you just finish it, print it, and put it in a folder, or pass it along to the chain of command or what have you. But at the end of the day, you're going to take a finished product and send it on wherever it needs to be filed. But what you have to keep in mind, we've already discussed that report might be needed for a court. It might be needed for simply your boss to read and understand the situation that happened that night. So what we want to do is make sure that we are telling the story not only in a logical way that we paint a picture that everybody understands exactly what happened, but we want it to flow in a way that similar to a movie. You don't want to have information that you gathered from someone who saw the end of the situation and then later notes about someone who saw the beginning of the situation, then have information about later on in your report about the suspect's name and where they live. So we want to not only have a certain pattern that we want to achieve, but we also want to tell the story in a logical way. Now, on the other hand, notes, that's the beginning of the process. That's where you're gathering information, and those notes may be anywhere in the story. You could gather information from someone who saw the beginning of the situation at the end, but you need to gather as much information. So basically, you want to understand that the beginning of the process is the investigation and the note taking. The end of the process is a report. Now, let's discuss all the aspects and the information that you would want to make sure are in the report. Right off the bat, we want to make sure that we have the information of all of our witnesses. So not only do you want the name of the witnesses, you want to know where they live, what number you can reach them at. Obviously, you never know when you may want to speak to them again to get more details, to clarify something. It's just who knows what you will need from them in the future. So the first thing you do when you start talking to someone is you would want to say, find out what they know in general, and then say, can I get your number? Because you don't want to waste your time with someone saying, no, I just walked up here a minute ago and you got all this information. So if once you conclude that the person does have pertinent information, you want to get their name, their address, their phone number, how you can get in touch with them, then you start gathering as much information. And this can be a very redundant process, because if there are several witnesses, you're going to have to get the same information from them over and over again. You're going to also in the notes, you're going to want to gather as much information about the time of day, the scene. I really could go into depth about how much information you should gather, but when it's all said and done, when you get all of your field notes and you start walking down the path of creating your report, you're going to want to have as much information. You're going to want to explain the weather conditions. And keep in mind, if you're a police officer and you explain that it was raining heavily, that would explain later why maybe some evidence washed away. So even the weather conditions are important to making your report. All right, so now we've gathered all the information that we need. We have the time of day. We have all our witness statements. We have all of our information to follow up with the witnesses if necessary. It's now time to compose the report. Now, as we've discussed, the report is the final document that everyone's going to not only use, but they're going to review. And listen, we talked about perception. It's a reflection of you and your ability to communicate. So not only is it important as far as the information it provides, it's important for you as a representation of your work. So once you start to compose your report, this is where we're going to paint that picture that we've discussed. This is where we're going to want to make sure that our grammar is good and our spelling is correct, and that we are walking down the path like you would in a movie with the right details at the right time. Now, to me, I think it's pretty obvious that you're going to want to start off with, what happened, why you were called out, who called you out, what you observed when you got on the scene. All these different things need to flow in the proper order. All right, so as I mentioned before, now all the note-taking's done, you gathered all the information, it's time to compose the report. Keep in mind, this is the part that everyone sees, that everyone's going to know. It's a reflection of you, and you want to be grammatically correct. You want your spelling to be correct, and you want to paint an accurate and understandable picture. So once you've done that, once you put all your information from your field notes into your report, it starts off with, it was a sunny day. I was called out on the scene because of a phone call. When I arrived on the scene, I met with the victim who was in this condition, and here is what I observed. Then I spoke to this witness, and I spoke to that witness. And then whatever the natural progression is of the story. So you want to, just like a movie, you start off with the introduction, you move towards a conclusion. And at the end of the conclusion is, I will follow up with whatever information that you didn't get, and your conclusions and your a summary of the information. So once you have that, you type it up, and then it's time to submit it. All right, that's all I have for this lesson in report writing. I'm Petty Officer Romero, and we'll see you next time for Job Corps.
Tell me what you gonna do, what you gonna do. Yeah. Bad boys, what you gonna do, what you gonna do when they come for you. Bad boys, what you gonna do when they come for you.